Imagine walking through the winding streets of ancient Rome just as the sun disappears and the city slips into darkness. The air is thick with anticipation. Rome, with its towering marble temples and crowded wooden neighborhoods, feels alive, but also fragile. Fires are a constant threat, and in those narrow alleyways, danger can lurk around every corner. Now, picture this. Suddenly, somewhere in the distance, a horn echoes through the night. You hear the hurried footsteps of men, not soldiers, but something different. These are the Vigiles, Rome's own guardians of the night. They rush toward the chaos, their torches flickering, their shadows dancing along the walls. In a city where flames can leap from house to house in seconds, these are the people you hope will find you first. But who were the Vigiles really? They were not born into glory. Most of them started life as slaves, then earned their freedom and a new purpose. The city offered them a chance. Prove your worth, serve as a vigil, and you could become a Roman citizen. For many, it was a dream worth fighting for. Their job was far from easy. With only simple buckets, axes, and some very early hand pumps, they had to stop fires before they turned whole neighborhoods to ash. The tools were basic, but the courage was real. Sometimes they even carried sponges soaked in vinegar to help them breathe through thick smoke. You could say they invented a kind of ancient gas mask. Every night, the Vigiles patrolled the city's busy streets and quiet corners, keeping watch from their tall towers. They were always ready to sound the alarm and leap into action. After the flames died down, their work was not done. They became the city's night police, searching for thieves or runaway slaves, keeping order when everyone else was asleep. The Vigiles were not perfect, though. Some let power go to their heads. There are stories of a few who took bribes to look the other way, or even let a rival's house burn. But for the most part, they were ordinary people in an extraordinary job. They faced danger for the chance at a new life and the hope of making their city safer. It is easy to forget these unsung heroes, lost in the shadows of history. Yet, their legacy lives on. The next time you see a firefighter racing to help or a police officer keeping watch at night, remember the Vigiles. They were Rome's first line of defense against chaos, and in many ways, the ancestors of our modern emergency services. If you love history as much as we do, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to Legacy of Empires to keep exploring the legacy of the ancient world. Picture this. You're walking through ancient Rome on a sweltering summer evening. The narrow streets are packed with wooden apartment buildings rising 6-7 stories high, their balconies almost touching across the alleyways. Oil lamps flicker in countless windows, cooking fires crackle in tiny kitchens, and the air itself seems ready to ignite. This was the reality that kept Roman emperors awake at night. Rome wasn't just the heart of an empire, it was a tinderbox waiting for a spark. For centuries, Romans had relied on bucket brigades and neighborhood volunteers when flames erupted. Imagine trying to fight a fire by passing leather buckets hand to hand up those towering apartment blocks. It was like trying to stop a river with a teacup. When fire struck, entire districts could vanish in hours, leaving thousands homeless and the empire's most important city scarred and smoldering. The breaking point came during the Great Fire of 64, under Emperor Nero. For 6 days and 7 nights, flames devoured Rome's heart. The Forum, the Circus Maximus, countless temples and homes, all reduced to ash and memory. People whispered that Nero himself had started the blaze, though history suggests he was actually in Antium, 50 miles away, when it began. But here's what's truly fascinating. Augustus had actually tried to solve this problem decades earlier. He'd created basic fire prevention rules and organized some emergency response, but it wasn't nearly enough for a city of over 1 million people. After the Great Fire, it became crystal clear that Rome needed something revolutionary. A permanent professional force dedicated entirely to protecting the city. Enter the Vigiles. Now, Emperor Septimius Severus gets credit for fully organizing these urban guardians, but their roots trace back to Augustus himself. The name Vigiles comes from the Latin word meaning watchful ones, and that's exactly what they were. Rome's sleepless sentinels. But here's where the story gets really interesting. Who do you think became these brave firefighters and night watchmen? Not Roman citizens, not soldiers from the legions. The Vigiles were recruited almost entirely from freed slaves, men who had earned or bought their freedom but still lived on society's margins. Think about the profound irony here. These were men who had once been considered property, now entrusted with protecting the most valuable property in the known world. They had everything to prove and everything to gain. Service in the Vigiles offered them something almost impossible to achieve any other way: a genuine path to full Roman citizenship. After 6 years of faithful service, a Vigiles could become a true Roman citizen with all the legal protections and social status that came with it. For a freed slave in ancient Rome, this was like winning the lottery and becoming a hero at the same time. The organization was massive by ancient standards. 7,000 men divided into 7 cohorts, each responsible for 2 of Rome's 14 districts. They worked in shifts around the clock, but their primary duty began when the sun set and honest citizens locked their doors. Picture these men preparing for their nightly patrol. They'd gather at their station house as shadows lengthened across the cobblestones, checking their equipment one final time. Tomorrow, some of them might not return. But tonight, they stood between Rome and chaos. The Vigiles understood something that modern emergency responders know well, that disasters don't wait for daylight, and neither can those sworn to fight them. In the flickering lamplight of ancient Rome, they became the empire's first line of defense against the twin threats of fire and crime. And this was just the beginning of their story. Imagine you're a newly recruited Vigiles, stepping into your station house for the first time. The air smells of leather, metal, and that distinctive smoky scent that never quite leaves a firefighter's equipment. Around you, veteran Vigiles are preparing for another night patrol, and you're about to discover just how challenging your new life will be. Your equipment is surprisingly simple, yet each piece tells a story of Roman ingenuity. You're handed a set of leather buckets, their surfaces worn smooth by countless emergency calls. These aren't just any buckets. They're specially designed with reinforced handles and wider mouths for maximum water capacity. Next comes your axe, its iron head sharpened to perfection. This tool could save lives by breaking down doors or cutting through burning beams, but it could also serve as a weapon when facing the dangerous criminals who prowled Rome's streets after dark. But here's where Roman engineering truly shines. You're introduced to something revolutionary for its time: a rudimentary water pump. These bronze and iron contraptions might look primitive to us, but they represented cutting-edge technology in ancient Rome. Some historians believe the Vigiles were among the first organized forces anywhere to use mechanical water pumps, centuries before similar devices appeared elsewhere in the world. Now here's a detail that might surprise you. Your squad leader hands you what looks like an ordinary sponge, but it's been soaked in vinegar. This wasn't for cleaning. It was your lifeline in a smoke-filled building. The acidic vinegar helped neutralize some of the toxic fumes, and holding this makeshift filter over your nose and mouth could mean the difference between rescue and collapse. It's remarkable to think that these ancient first responders had already figured out the basic principles of respiratory protection. Your training begins immediately, and it's unlike anything else in the Roman world. You learn to read the subtle signs that precede a fire, the way smoke moves, the color of flames, the sounds a building makes when it's about to collapse. You practice climbing exterior walls using ropes and hooks, because Roman apartment buildings rarely had proper staircases to the upper floors. But fighting fires was only half your job. As darkness falls over Rome, you transform from firefighter to police officer. The city at night was a completely different world from the bustling marketplace of daylight hours. Taverns overflowed with drunk soldiers and merchants. Brothels operated openly in certain districts. Thieves waited in shadowy alleyways for wealthy Romans returning from dinner parties. Your patrol route takes you through the narrow, winding streets that Romans called the labyrinthine ways. These weren't the broad, straight roads that connected distant provinces. These were the twisted arteries of daily life, barely wide enough for 2 people to pass. Street lamps were rare, so you carried torches, their flickering light creating dancing shadows that could hide both friend and foe. The watchtowers scattered throughout your district served as your communication network. When a fire broke out, the tower guard would sound a horn that echoed across the neighborhood. Different horn patterns indicated different types of emergencies. A short blast might signal a minor house fire, while a series of long, mournful notes could mean an entire block was engulfed in flames. But perhaps your most dangerous duty was hunting arsonists. These criminals weren't just destructive, they were terrorists who could bring down the empire's greatest city. Roman law showed no mercy to fire starters. Those convicted faced execution, often by the very element they had used as a weapon. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, and it served as a powerful deterrent. You also dealt with runaway slaves, a constant problem in a society built on forced labor. These weren't necessarily dangerous criminals. Many were simply desperate people seeking freedom. But Roman law was clear, and your duty was to return them to their owners. It's one of those aspects of ancient life that reminds us how different their world was from ours. What's truly fascinating is how the Vigiles developed techniques that we still use today. They learned to create fire breaks by demolishing buildings in a fire's path. They discovered that certain materials could smother flames better than water. They even developed early forms of crowd control, managing the chaos that erupted whenever disaster struck. The physical demands were extraordinary. A typical night shift lasted from sunset to sunrise, covering several miles of walking through streets that could turn deadly without warning. You might start the evening pulling a family from a burning building, then spend the pre-dawn hours chasing thieves through the markets near the Tiber River. And through it all, you carried the knowledge that success in this dangerous profession could transform your entire life. Every night you survived, every fire you fought, every criminal you caught brought you closer to that ultimate prize, full Roman citizenship, and the respect that came with it. These men weren't just doing a job. They were writing the first chapters in the long story of professional emergency services, creating traditions and techniques that would echo through the centuries. Every time a modern firefighter enters a burning building or a police officer walks a night beat, they're following in the footsteps of Rome's Vigiles. Are you fascinated by this ancient legacy? Then comment your thoughts, like the video, share it with fellow history lovers, and subscribe to Legacy of Empires for more epic journeys. Here's where our story takes a darker turn, because even the most noble institutions can be corrupted when human nature meets opportunity and desperation. Picture yourself as a wealthy Roman merchant. You own several properties in a prime district near the Forum, but your business rival has just opened a competing shop right next to yours. His location is better, his prices are lower, and customers are starting to prefer his establishment. In modern times, you might hire a lawyer or launch a marketing campaign. But in ancient Rome, some people had a more sinister solution. Late one night, a hooded figure approaches a Vigiles squad leader during his patrol. A small leather pouch changes hands, heavy with silver coins. The conversation is brief and spoken in whispers. By morning, your rival's shop has mysteriously burned to the ground, while the buildings on either side remain untouched. The official report declares it an unfortunate accident. Perhaps a lamp was knocked over, or sparks drifted from a cooking fire. This wasn't just theoretical corruption. Historical records and ancient writers document cases where the very men sworn to protect Rome became instruments of destruction and revenge. The irony was painful. Those who fought fires by night sometimes helped start them for the right price. The temptation was enormous, and we need to understand why. Remember, most Vigiles were freed slaves trying to build new lives in a society that still looked down on them. Their official pay was modest, barely enough to support a family. Meanwhile, they walked past magnificent mansions every night, witnessing wealth beyond their wildest dreams. When a rich patrician offered a year's wages for a small favor, the moral choice wasn't always clear. But corruption took many forms beyond arson for hire. Some Vigiles developed protection rackets, demanding payments from tavern owners and shopkeepers in exchange for better response times during emergencies. Others used their authority to settle personal grudges, arresting enemies on false charges or conveniently looking the other way when crimes occurred. The most troubling cases involved vigiles who crossed completely to the other side of the law. Imagine the irony. By day, they knew every wealthy home in their district, every entrance and exit, every pattern of when families left for their country estates. By night, they were supposed to protect these same properties. Some couldn't resist using their inside knowledge for personal gain. Ancient Roman writers tell us of vigiles who became accomplished thieves themselves, using their official access to scope out targets and their knowledge of patrol routes to avoid capture. They knew exactly when certain streets would be unguarded, which buildings had valuable goods stored inside, and how to move stolen merchandise through the city without detection. The political implications were equally serious. Rome's elite quickly realized that controlling the vigiles meant controlling a powerful tool for settling disputes and eliminating rivals. Wealthy families began competing to place their own people in leadership positions within the force. What started as a public safety organization gradually became entangled in the complex web of Roman politics. This created a vicious cycle. As corruption spread, honest vigiles found themselves pressured to participate or risk being excluded from the unofficial benefits that supplemented their meager wages. Some genuinely heroic individuals refused and continued doing their duty honorably, but they often found themselves isolated and sometimes even targeted by their corrupt colleagues. The situation became so problematic that several emperors had to implement reforms and purges within the vigiles' ranks. New oversight systems were created, punishment for corrupt behavior was made more severe, and attempts were made to improve official compensation to reduce the temptation for illegal activities. Yet despite these dark aspects, we must remember something remarkable. Even with all this corruption, the vigiles continued to function as an effective force for protecting Rome. The majority of these men, even when faced with incredible temptation and social pressure, continued to risk their lives fighting fires and chasing criminals through dangerous streets. Their dedication kept the empire's greatest city from burning to the ground night after night. What's particularly fascinating is how this ancient struggle with corruption mirrors challenges that modern emergency services face around the world. The same tensions between duty and temptation, between modest public salaries and exposure to great wealth, between individual morality and systemic pressures, continue to test firefighters, police officers, and other public servants today. The Vigiles' story reminds us that heroism and corruption can exist side by side, sometimes even within the same organization or the same individual. These weren't comic book characters who were purely good or evil. They were complex human beings trying to navigate an equally complex world. And here's something that might surprise you about their lasting impact. Those water pumps we mentioned earlier weren't just innovative firefighting tools. They represented a technological leap that influenced engineering across the empire. Some historians believe the Vigiles were indeed the first organized state force anywhere in the world to use mechanical water pumps for emergency response, predating similar innovations by centuries in other civilizations. The legacy is complicated, just like the men who created it. The organizational structure they developed, the techniques they pioneered, and even the ethical challenges they faced became templates that influenced emergency services throughout history. Every modern fire department that struggles with funding, every police force that battles corruption, every emergency service that tries to balance public duty with personal needs can trace these dilemmas back to those torchlit streets of ancient Rome. The Vigiles weren't perfect, but they were pioneering. And sometimes that's exactly how progress happens, messily, imperfectly, but persistently moving toward something better. As we reach the end of this journey through ancient Rome's shadowy streets, take a moment to imagine what the world might have looked like without the Vigiles. Picture the greatest city in human history reduced to smoldering ruins, fire after fire consuming entire neighborhoods with no organized response. Envision the chaos of endless nights where criminals roamed freely, where the wealthy barricaded themselves behind thick walls while everyone else lived in fear. The Vigiles were far more than just Rome's first firefighters and night police. They were the thin line between civilization and chaos, the bridge between the organized daylight world of the Forum and the dangerous realm of Roman knights. In many ways, they represented something entirely new in human history. The idea that a society could and should organize itself to protect all its members, not just the powerful few. Think about the profound transformation they represented. For the first time in recorded history, a government took responsibility for round-the-clock public safety. Before the Vigiles, emergency response was largely a matter of individual luck, neighborhood cooperation, or private wealth. After them, it became a civic duty and a professional calling. Their legacy echoes through time in ways both obvious and subtle. Every time you see a fire truck racing through city streets, you're witnessing an idea that began with those leather buckets and bronze pumps in ancient Rome. When police officers walk their beats at night, they're following patrol routes first mapped out by freed slaves 2,000 years ago. The very concept of organized emergency services, of professional first responders trained and equipped to face danger on behalf of their communities, traces its roots back to those torch-lit streets of the Eternal City. But their story teaches us something deeper about the price of order in any society. The Vigiles weren't perfect. They struggled with corruption, faced impossible choices between duty and survival, and sometimes became the very thing they were meant to fight against. Yet they persisted, night after night, year after year, for centuries. Their imperfect heroism kept Rome functioning when it could have collapsed into chaos. Consider the remarkable irony at the heart of their story. Men who had once been considered property became the protectors of the world's most valuable city. Former slaves earned citizenship by risking their lives for a society that had enslaved them. It's a powerful reminder that progress often comes from unexpected places, that heroes don't always fit our comfortable expectations. The Vigiles also pioneered something we take for granted today, the idea that public safety is everyone's responsibility, not just the concern of those who can afford private protection. Their organization was funded by the state, served all districts regardless of wealth, and created a model of civic duty that influenced civilizations for millennia to come. What's truly remarkable is how their innovations spread throughout the Roman Empire and beyond. Archaeological evidence shows that similar fire brigades and night watch organizations appeared in cities across the Mediterranean world, from Britain to North Africa. The Vigiles didn't just protect Rome. They created a template for urban safety that helped secure an entire civilization. Their technical innovations were equally influential. Those water pumps we discussed weren't just firefighting tools. They represented advances in hydraulic engineering that influenced everything from agriculture to mining. The organizational structures they developed, with their clear chains of command, specialized roles, and systematic training programs, became models for military and civilian organizations throughout the ancient world. But perhaps most importantly, the Vigiles established something that we still struggle with today: the delicate balance between authority and service, between power and responsibility. They showed that effective public safety requires not just brave individuals, but strong institutions, adequate resources, and constant vigilance against corruption. When we look at modern challenges, cities struggling with crime, firefighters battling increasingly dangerous blazes, communities trying to build trust between citizens and law enforcement, we're seeing echoes of problems the Vigiles faced centuries ago. Their story reminds us that these challenges aren't new, and that solutions require the same combination of individual courage, institutional support, and community commitment that sustained those ancient Roman night watchmen. So what would Rome have been without them? Almost certainly it would have burned. Not just once, but repeatedly, until the greatest city in the ancient world became nothing more than a cautionary tale about the price of neglecting public safety. Instead, Rome endured for centuries more, partly because someone recognized that civilization requires constant protection day and night in times of peace and times of crisis. The Vigiles understood something profound about human nature and society, that darkness brings out both the worst and the best in people. that chaos is always lurking at the edges of order, and that heroes aren't born. They're made through service, sacrifice, and the daily choice to stand between civilization and its enemies. Their story teaches us that the price of order isn't paid once and forgotten. It's paid every night, by every person who chooses duty over comfort, service over safety, the common good over personal gain. In every firefighter who runs toward danger while others flee, in every officer who walks dangerous streets to keep them safe, in every emergency responder who answers the call at 3 in the morning, the spirit of the Vigiles lives on. The torches they carried through Rome's ancient streets may have long since flickered out, but the light they kindled, the idea that we are all responsible for each other's safety, still burns bright in cities around the world, and that, perhaps, is the greatest legacy any group of heroes could leave behind. Tell us in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Legacy of Empires for more untold stories of the ancient world.